One of the biggest problems that photographers today face is the issue of data storage. In this interview, I sit down with Mr. Mark Fuccio to talk about data storage, best practices, and what you can do to make sure that the data that you shoot today and that you save today is available for you tomorrow. All right, folks, I'm sitting here with my good buddy, Mr. Mark Fuccio. Mark and I have known each other for quite a long time. I'm not going to reveal how long, but it's been a long time since I've known this man. And he and we get together from time to time, like we did yesterday in downtown San Jose, and have our geek lunches where we just sit down, talk about Apple stuff, storage problems, podcasting, all this cool stuff. Mark is an expert in the storage field. And one of the directions that the conversation went yesterday was photography and this nut that photographers have been trying to crack over the past, 5-10 years. And it seems to be like a slippery pig. We can never quite catch it. So Mark agreed to come on today to help us demystify and maybe catch that slippery pig and talk about some of the issues facing photographers in terms of data storage and backup, and some real world things that we can do to have that peace of mind in knowing that if everything goes away, the San Andreas fault decides to start acting up tomorrow, we'll be able to still get our data from somewhere. Mark Fuccio, welcome to This Week in Photo.
Frederick, great to be here. I've listened to the show for a long time. It's good to finally be able to sit down and record, because you've been asking me and talking about it for years, and yes, we've just never aligned our schedules.
Like literally years we've been talking about getting you on the show. and it just, for some reason, the listeners know how that goes. Some reason the stars never align and it never quite happens. We made it happen this time, though.
Right. I was thinking you were always the missing host, because I listened before it was This Week in Photo, when it was This Week in Photography.
Yes.
Where Scott Bourne and Alex Lindsay were the hosts, and there was always this missing host named Frederick.
Yes. I remember both of those guys, and I remember actually having a life back then, and I couldn't come on the show as often as I do now that I don't actually have a life. So it's good. It's good. All right, Mike, you and I were talking about yesterday was data storage and all the options that are out there for photographers. And I think if I recall correctly, what I said was, and I was speaking in the first person, this is like where my mind is going. I've got Drobos back there. I've got my data on them. There's the issues that I've talked about on TWiP before with Apple Photos and me wanting really badly to use Apple Photos, but then they cap it at their 1 terabyte limit. So I can't, I have to rethink things in order to get my data up there. And then there's other options out there like Mylio, and, it just goes on and on. There's Dropbox where I could store stuff. There's all these different options. You get to a point, and I'm sure a lot of photographers can sympathize or empathize with this. You get to this point where you're like, you know what? Forget it. Forget the whole thing. I'm going to go to Fry's or Best Buy or whatever, buy some cheap drives, plug them into my computer, save my stuff in 2 places, and then, hope for the best. And you yesterday said, yeah, it's probably not the best strategy, right?
Right. Hope is not a strategy, as the wise people have said.
Yes.
And we met way back when. I spent 5 years at Drobo, and I left after Macworld in 2011. Mm-hmm. And I think I was helped catalyze you come into the company and spend a little bit of time there.
Yeah.
So just in the interest of full disclosure, we both own lots of Drobos and love them very much. Mm-hmm. But there are other unsolved storage problems that I think are probably more important to photographers. And many people have heard the 3-2-1 story, right? Your data is not real unless you have 3 copies. You want to have it on 2 different systems, and 1 copy should be off-site.
Right.
So, right now, I think the biggest area that I see going on in the storage world is people are trying to innovate how to become the one, the one for the offsite copy. Mm-hmm. Where you started, buying a bunch of whole drives and multiple drives and doing it locally. For some it would work. I don't think it's a particularly elegant solution, because number one, it's just more junk, more clutter on your desk. I don't know if you have an explicit tag or not, but there is a word we know that describes all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's not just the drives, it's the cords, it's the power supplies. And problems multiply, right? Things need to be all plugged in, which means you need more power strips. So that's more additional clutter. So I really don't think that's a good strategy, in large part because you still have individual drives, and you may decide, okay, well, I'll buy them two at a time and make a copy of a copy. But then guess who owns that?
Yeah.
You do.
Right.
Do you really want to be reporting to your boss called the hard disk drive and your backup software, whether it's some of the venerable tools like Carbon Copy Cloner or Super Duper or others? I don't think so. I mean, there's much better things to be doing with your life.
Yeah, we as carbon-based life forms are generally the weakest link in any chain, right?
Right.
So you introduce, and I know because I am carbon-based, you introduced me into, I think I am, but you introduced me into this workflow, and because I'm so busy, things are going to fall apart if I'm not on top of it. Even if I set calendar events and reminders and all this stuff, it's going to fall apart. Yeah,
that's exactly right, and that's one of the reasons that I think your listeners should. I'm partial to Drobo, but there are other multi-drive enclosures and solutions out there.
Yeah,
they're differentiated a little bit on price and performance, and frankly, also geekiness. Some have more knobs and levers, and if you're the sort of person who wants to understand RAID levels and think about file systems and manage all of that, that's great. There are many, many, many products out there for you. But the key thing is, I think you should get some sort of multi-bay enclosure that uses some form of RAID. RAID.
Well, define RAID for the people. I mean, we've heard it before, and
Yes.
clearly it doesn't mean like a drug
Bug
raid.
killer.
It doesn't mean bug killer. What is RAID?
RAID is an acronym. It stands for a redundant array of independent disks. That was what it was originally. It just passed its 25th anniversary in the last about 2 years ago. As the price of hard drives has come down, people have coined an alternate version, redundant array of inexpensive disks. Mm-hmm. But the key idea here is you have a controller. It's either hardware built in the RAID unit, or you can set up disk utility in OS 10 to create a RAID using a system software. And the idea is that it pools all that capacity together, and it gives you two things. It gives you the increased capacity. You get a combination of some of the sums of the drives, and the exact amount is a little bit complex, and we'll just table that there for the moment.
Sure.
The other thing you get is increased performance, because what RAID will do is it will take your picture and say you have 8-drive RAID array. We'll think about it as it's breaking up and it's writing 6 or 7 pieces of the photo simultaneously to the different drives. And on the last remaining 1 or 2 drives, depending on the type of RAID you use, it's writing a little bit of error correcting information. And this is where a lot of people think RAID is spooky and voodoo, because most people are used to a backup where you make an exact copy of something. What RAID does is it uses a lot of Boolean algebra and capabilities to be able to, if any one of the drive fails, it can reconstruct what was on that drive from the remaining surviving drives in the drive pack.
So you can sustain, if you have multiple drives in there, you can sustain a failure of this moving mechanism that's in there.
That's right. Yeah. What people like to affectionately call spinning rust, because it's magnetic, and what's magnet? Well, it's iron, and we all remember playing with those things as kids.
Right. That's right. So okay. So help me understand where we are now. So if we get in our time machine and go back in time, say 20 years, right? I remember a time where we remember this whole idea of tape backups, and you had the SCSI interface, and you could plug this tape back up into your computer, and all the stuff that you didn't really need on hand, you could just put on a tape theoretically and put in the closet. But the stuff that you really need, you kept on the drive. So that was then. Then you fast forward maybe 10 years ish, and now everything's hard drive based. No more tapes, hard drive based. But the MO was That was back when most people just had one computer, right? So you have your computer, and you have all the stuff that you're working on your desktop or in some sort of local file hierarchy. And then you have external drives for other stuff, and maybe that's your backup. So when it's active, it's on my desktop, and when I'm done with it, it goes to the external drive, and I mirror that external drive onto a second external drive, and everybody's happy. Now, what I'm hearing from you is state of the art would be to have at least one RAID plugged into your machine, whether it's from Drobo or one of the Drobo's competitors or whatever, but you have one RAID plugged into your machine, and then you have a cloud type backup as part of your MO, but then you also need something away from your house. So you need the third piece. So my question is, as I go around the world to get to the actual question, my question is, why did we go from just having two drives plugged in and, one fails? Okay, go buy another one, plug it in and copy back onto that one. Go from that metaphor to now we need a RAID and we need cloud and we need offsite and all this stuff. Why did it get so complex just over like 10 years?
I think the key answer to that is megapixels.
Okay. Yeah.
It become sensors and cameras have gotten much better. Images are getting larger. Instead of working with a compressed JPEG, people are working with RAW. So the amount of data that you create is going up.
Yeah.
And also, hard drives have also gotten dramatically larger. I mean, if you think 20 years ago, maybe a gigabyte was 20 years ago, 95. So gigabyte drives were introduced in, I think, in the workstation world in like 93, maybe 92 timeframe. So things are, right now, I have 6 terabyte drives. That's 6,000 times larger than something that cost $4,000 back in 1995.
That's just crazy.
So along with that, just people taking way more pictures. Why? Because storage is inexpensive. Cameras make it very, very easy. So data explosion has really data collection is really taking off.
Yeah. So
what used to be something very, because of expense and small size, people would very gingerly select which images they want. Now it's easier just to store everything. Yeah. So also as technology has emerged, people realize, okay, if a drive fails, everything on it is gone. Mm-hmm. Maybe I could recover. Maybe I could go to a place like Drive Savers and spend many thousands of dollars, to do a data recovery. Yeah. But it's better to have a backup, and a lot of times people confuse RAID and backup. Backup is really having a separate independent copy of your data. Yeah. And it exists solely to protect you in case something bad happens with that. Either a hard drive fails, it gets stolen, what have you. So RAID systems and using them from backup can protect you against a hard drive failure. But the reason for the one offsite piece, what about a flood? What about a fire? What about a theft? Mm-hmm. It doesn't protect against that. So since we no longer have negatives, we need to make sure we have separate multiple copies of that digital file in different places. Yeah, that makes complete sense, and it's when you put it that way, it's scary, Mark. It is. It's very scary, and if you consider how much of our lives these days are digital. I mean, even this, right? We're talking through Skype, and I'm recording the audio and video to a hard drive. And that's going to be published to thousands of people who are going to see it. Nothing physical ever interacts, right? These are all zeros and ones that we're creating right now that then become a product that people see, which is valuable. And so if I was to lose this interview, then it would be a pain in the butt to try and recreate the magic that we are, of this conversation right now. That's right. Exactly. It's like the archaeological record. There's a lot of stuff that's missing that has been blown away by storms and mud and sun and sand and stuff we just do not know. And I think the thing right now is the world is going digital. And I really want to come back to where you opened. I really think that having multiple drives, I think, is a really bad idea. I mean, it's a dumb idea. And if you're
why is it dumb? Why isn't that better than nothing, or is it better than nothing?
Okay, so well, all right. So if maybe having no backup is probably zero,
right?
And truly for the foolhardy.
Yeah.
Having copies on multiple drives. The reason I'm so opposed to it is all of a sudden you have to manage and remember what's on each drive. And invariably, people don't buy 2 drives at one time. They'll buy them every couple of years. So they may have maybe a 4 terabyte. And now, okay, I just bought a 6 terabyte drive. I copy that everything over, and then I add another 2 terabytes of data. Now suddenly I'm confused. That file, where's the original copy? Which drive is it on?
Yeah.
If you do this over a couple of years, you just have this tremendous psychic overhead for really no benefit. It's just torturing yourself. And then, as I was saying, just all kidding aside, it's not just that you have lots of extra cables and things. It's more moving pieces, more ways things can fail.
Yeah.
So,
and they do fail. I mean, they do fail. Like, for example, I do TWiP every week in multiple podcasts through the week, and I keep my workstation pretty much the same all the time. It's been the same for years, right? But every now and then you sit down and something just doesn't work. Right. And it's not like you updated or it's bought something new. You sat here last night, it worked great. You sit here today, now it doesn't work. And you have to figure that out. And it's because a lot of the stuff is still mechanical and there's still points of failure in here, right?
Right. And, a lot of MacBooks and some of the Windows ultra thin books, they have SSD flash drives in them. They're great. They're very, very fast, but they just don't have the capacity that a mechanical drive does.
Yeah.
So I mean, really I think the unfortunate, maybe not really well told story is if you have digital data, it's basically a lifelong, if you want to own it and have it, you're embarking on a lifelong quest to shepherd it and steward it. And that's part of the reasons leading to some of the cloud solutions. People hear about Amazon or Carbonite or CrashPlan or companies, Backblaze, companies like this. Basically what they're capitalism, right? They're trading, for $5 or some number of dollars a month. They're trading, okay, they provide an extra place that you can upload and have your data all in one place, and it's protected. Thing about those services is just given the economics of cloud companies, look really carefully in your terms of service. You may think they're backing up, but they're not. They can't afford to.
Yeah.
Except for Amazon. The other guys aren't. So again, that's just another piece in this puzzle of how to protect your data. So that's why it's this. I think it was Peter Krogh who originally boiled it down to 3-2-1. That's the sort of recipe going forward. Other things I've seen is hard drives wear out. When you buy them, they have a warranty: 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever.
Yeah.
It's been my experience that Seagate drives tend to fail within 6 months of their warranty, and WD drives tend to fail 6 months before or after their warranty date.
Right. And that's that MTBF number, right? And MTBF is an acronym for mean time between failures.
Right.
That you see on the box. When you buy a drive, you'll see MTBF and some number, right? So what's that number? That's that 6 months?
Okay, so meantime, MTBF is really mean time between fooling because it's a number, it's a spec, and the drive manufacturers, they're all in these race and they're predicting, okay, 1 million hours or 1.2 million hours or whatever. And I've read some of the academic papers and I've been to some seminars where there's a fellow who did reliability studies at IBM and high-end storage company called Network Appliance. And basically his point is MTBF is a fiction that disk drive manufacturers use in order to market their drive. Okay. That the way it's calculated, it's sort of the thing that's in the news right now, right? About the emissions scandal for VW Diesel. That it's tested in such a way that has very low emissions, but in actual driving conditions, it emits a lot more carbon-based pollution. Yeah. Similar things in measuring MTBF. You're testing it in an idealist test environment. And yes, there you probably will get 1,000,000 hours. But in reality, if you take that, is that something you're putting in your bag and takes
Yeah.
2 airplane trips a week? That's a completely different environment. So the reality is that the way I think about it is the hard drive company is basically making the deal. They're saying, okay, we'll sell this product to you, and we're confident that it will work through its warranty life, 1, 2, 3, 5, whatever number of years. And thereafter, they're saying, okay, well, we've ended our liability.
Yeah.
So if they've ended their liability, who owns it? You do.
Right. Yeah. Well, like you said, once you start creating digital information, you become the shepherd and the steward of that digital information. That MTBF and the warranty and the lifetime of the drive and all that stuff. Whatever, right? It's all your responsibility to make sure that it is ready when you need it, which segues me into another question. So you talk about that trifecta, right? Having your local copy, an offsite copy, and a cloud-based copy, right?
I think you're the offsite copy and the cloud-based copy are really the same thing.
Okay.
So it's 2 local copies.
Okay.
And an offsite.
And an offsite. Okay. So where does, because I was speaking to someone the other day and we were talking about storage. I don't know why it keeps coming up, probably because we all create data, but we were talking about storage, and he was saying, why, like, when was you have, like, I have terabytes of data. I think I got like 5-10 terabytes of data that I'm shepherding and stewarding, right? So, and he was like, okay, of that data, how much of it have you actually had to access in the last year or even 2 years? And it was very little. A lot of it is just backup, and it's like, okay, I can't, this is my kid, right? It's from day one, can't get rid of that. That's precious. So you have all this data, but it's relatively online. So his proposition was, why not take most of that data and throw it up on Amazon Glacier or a service like that, where you're paying pennies per gig, and just let it sit there. You can still access it if you really need to. Why do you have to have it online all the time? So I wanted to put that to you. Where should a kind of cold storage backup plan be factored into your overall storage strategy?
So that's a very interesting question, and I'll address it directly in a moment. But I think it's more of an instance of thinking about what is the role of an offsite, and the role of offsite is to protect you against you get ripped off, you get flooded, you have a fire, something bad happens, to your 2 copies locally.
Yeah.
So it's sort of the third leg of the stool, so to speak, in protecting. What you were describing really addresses the question of, do I really need to have a second copy of everything locally? So just pick a number. Say I have 10 terabytes of images. In any 1 year, I may only be using 1 terabyte.
Right.
So
less, yeah.
Or less. So really thinking about whether you go to Amazon Glacier or other cloud providers, you're making a decision. Okay, well, I don't need all of this stuff here locally. Let me wait however many months it takes to upload it and have it there, and it's stored. And we will trust Amazon will do backup because we know they do, and we've read their terms of service. We won't go to some of the other guys because we've read their term of service and they don't do backup. They're basically saying, hey, we're the offsite copy, we're your third copy. Something bad could happen to us, like something bad could happen to you or one of your 2.
Right.
So I like Amazon for that reason. I use Amazon for for data storage, but really there, it's the key message is, you need to have 2 copies just in case something bad happens.
Even on Amazon? So if you decide to use Amazon Glacier,
no,
you should have, okay, so you could just have one Glacier, right, and then other.
Yes, because Amazon, they will, I'm not sure about Glacier. I haven't read their terms of service recently, but their S3 storage service, they offer it, and their part of their terms is it's redundant and it's protected. I'm not sure if they offer the redundancy guarantee on Glacier.
We have to look into that.
Right, and they're well-known tools. You can look in the Mac App Store for tools that will upload into S3. Basically, you can set up an account, and Amazon will gladly bill you each month for how much ever storage you use.
It's very cheap, though.
It's very cheap.
Insanely cheap.
I just received an email from them last week. They've had yet another price decrease on their S3 storage.
Yeah.
And on S3 they have a so-called reduced redundancy rate, which means basically, okay, well, we'll only store one copy and we'll charge you less. And so again, here the way to think about it is how much risk. Everything I do removes risk. I can't remove every risk. But each level of risk I can remove. So maybe by having two copies, you're protecting against 90 or 95%. A friend of mine's a fireman, volunteer fireman in Colorado, and he told me one time that U.S. fire statistics are the probability of fire in any one structure is about 5%. So that means sort of like once every 20 years, probably your house or something may catch a fire. Yeah. So by going off site, I can knock another 5% off. Now you're factoring, okay, what is the risk that they're having? At that point, you've probably removed 99% of the risk. And, at that more, it's okay. You could certainly do more and lower your risk, but it's going to become exponentially more expensive.
Exactly, diminishing returns at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So how do you factor in? So that's the glacier piece of it. So we've got like the crash plans, the backblazes, those guys that are doing sort of the front end.
And don't forget Google, and don't forget Microsoft Azure.
And that's what I want to bring up.
There's a really crowded space out there.
Yeah, because we've got Google and Google with the Google Drive. We've got Apple with their Drive. We've got Box. Microsoft. It goes on and on. These and storage is getting cheaper and cheaper. No longer is it just Dropbox. It's these other services, some of which integrate really tightly into the operating system that you happen to be working on. But my question goes to a couple months ago, Google revamped Google Photos, and now you get unlimited storage of your photos on Google, or same with Flickr.
But at diminished quality, I understand.
And diminished quality, but okay and good enough for, I would say 60% of the people out there, or maybe 50% of the TWiP audience. So when you look at stuff like that, what I'm doing, like in my head, I have this flow chart of, okay, here's your main storage. This part is on the Drobo. Maybe these go over to the Glacier, and then this goes to Backblaze, or Backblaze covers everything. And then now you have this little nugget that you can put in Apple Photos. So now you can see those on your watch and on your tablets on an Apple TV. But then this goes to Flickr. Yeah. Like, how do you factor those in there? Am I overcomplicating it?
Yes, it's very, very, very geeky. You're looking at too many things, and again, it goes back to how much can you manage? And it's sort of
I don't want to manage any of it.
It's sort of like friends tell me that they teach at Harvard Business School that the reason you shouldn't lie is because it's too complex to keep track of which lies you tell to different people. And same thing for if you're backing up to all these different services. And there are apps in the Mac App Store where they basically their value proposition is use all of these different, get accounts, free accounts on all these different services, and we'll manage and distribute your data for you. I think life is too short. Find a vendor you like. Right now, it seems to me that we're in this battle. It's a new area. I think the economics are such that I think a lot of the cloud vendors are going to be dropping out. So I would stick with probably the really big guns. So I'd say, okay, maybe you're comfortable with Google. They have certainly attractive prices. Ditto for Microsoft, although from my looking, it seems a little harder to use Microsoft services, and maybe that will change. And then Amazon is great. I mean, their whole mantra is just grow, and price everything so that has minimal profit. So they're certainly reinvesting their infrastructure, and they're passing on great deals to users.
Yeah, I mean, I know we got to wrap up here soon, but should people be worried though? I mean, there's always that there's multiple degrees of paranoia when it comes to the cloud and your personal data in the cloud. Everything from maybe they'll go out of business, or maybe they'll have a data issue and they'll lose my data, or maybe they'll get hacked and my data will be compromised, or maybe the NSA will decide that it's okay for them to go look through your data. Putting things on the cloud, is that valid? When you start thinking about storing your sort of archival data in Glacier?
I think the best way to answer that is to think about the point of view, because it sort of conflates different questions. One is it possible the NSA will go out and tap this? Yes, of course it is. Mm-hmm. The question is, out of the tens or hundreds of millions of accounts, what is the probability they will go after yours?
Security through obscurity. Yes.
Right. So, it certainly is possible. And that's, again, there's all these stories recently over the past couple of years about servers being seized and other people, having their data locked up and can't get it back. This is a very open area, I think also in the legal system as well. Mm-hmm. So I would recommend that there are tools out there. It's easy enough. If you think you need more protection than going to one cloud company, go diversify and go to a second one. Mm-hmm. It's probably very unlikely that the feds were going to go and bust Amazon and Google and Microsoft, et cetera, at the same time.
Right.
But the key message is, the company you mentioned before, Backblaze, their value is $5 a month, upload everything.
Yeah.
CrashPlan, has similar levels of plans. So there are so many providers out there, and it's really dirt cheap compared to what's at stake. Mm-hmm. $3, $4, $5 a month. Again, sort of that zero line. If you're not doing anything, you're less than a fool. So I would go as far as to say that it's almost mandatory to use a service like that, because you look at it like fire insurance, right? Which you think of it like, oh man, I got to pay that every month for nothing, But then when your house burns down and it's a $500 deductible to get your house rebuilt, then you had a house fire once recently, didn't you?
I did. A couple of years ago, I had a house fire, and it wasn't destructive. It was traumatic more than it gave me.
But I bet you didn't.
It gave me post-traumatic stress disorder more than it damaged my home.
But I bet you didn't feel foolish for paying fire insurance.
No, I didn't. And that was at that point, it was like, okay, you always feel like there's like this shield around you, even with car insurance, right? You drive around, because mm-hmm. as a kid, I used to, I'm not paying car insurance. I could use that money for something else. I could buy clothes with that. And you drive around and you feel a little bit more paranoid, like, oh, I better not go so fast, because if I get in an accident, it's coming out of my pocket. But when you have insurance, not that you drive recklessly or you do reckless things, it just gives you that second level of peace of mind to know that A, you're not breaking the law, but also B, you feel like if something happens, you are covered. You're protected.
Right. So to wrap it up, sort of make things actionable, I'd recommend viewers and listeners, if they don't have, certainly if they don't have an external copy of their data on a hard drive, you need to take action as soon as this podcast is over. Yeah. If you have multiple drives, you have a little bit more luxury, but within the next 2 hours, you need to go to either Amazon or B&H and look for RAID storage solutions, because there are many fine products out there. Mm-hmm. And
do your research. Do your research and find the one that fits you best.
Right. And then also a little bit, after you do that, then the next thing is you get a cloud company and start the upload process, because it will take a while. Our internet is faster down than it is up. So
it is. Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, no one will remember the pain of, I had to spend this number of dollars. 6 months from now, that will be a distant memory. But you'll have that comfort every day that your photos are protected.
Perfect. We'll end on that. Mark Fuccio, if people want to ping you directly through the social media ethers, how do they reach out to contact you?
The best way is through Twitter, and I'm there. It's at Mark Fuccio, MarkFuccio.
Easy. Mark, thank you for
That's
coming
right.
on the show. I appreciate it. Always a pleasure chatting with you. This feels just like one of our traditional lunches at Poorhouse Bistro in San Jose, or
That's yes,
where do
indeed.
we go? Poorhouse Bistro. What's the other one in Santana Row we go to?
Pizza Antigua, and also our third or fourth place is Angie's Pizza, and Vito's Pizza,
Vito's Pizza,
Vito's Pizza, and also Sue's Mongolian Barbecue.
Oh
in
yeah,
Santa
we got to
Clara.
go back to Sue's. We haven't been there in forever. Yeah, let's do Sue's next. Next meeting is Sue's. Perfect.
Excellent.
All right, Mark, I'll let you get back to your evening. Thanks a lot for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Frederick. Glad this finally happened.
Yeah, likewise. Take
Bye.
care. Bye-bye.